The story's nowhere near as horrifying as some of the other ones I read here, but when I found this subreddit, I knew I wanted to share this experience here. So 3 years ago, I tried Tinder for the first time. I was 25 at the time, and, well, most 25-year-old women had dabbled on Tinder or the like. I haven't been single since I was like 17. I met my ex while I was in high school. 6 years later, we got married, had a baby. I was happy, but those last couple years together, he had really begun to resent me and the family we had created together. I fought to keep a relationship together, but the abuse came more frequent and more intense. It got to the point where I took our baby and fled the house in the middle of the night. My mind was scared, and my heart was raw. It was a really difficult time in my life. A couple of months after I left, I had a new home, a new job, and a renewed sense of life. I was starting to open up and could feel myself healing. I was, however, lonely. I was adjusting to shared custody and spent the weekends alone. I didn't want to jump into a relationship, but I did want to experience some of the things my 8-year relationship didn't allow me to do. Joining Tinder felt fun. It was new and scary, and after so much trauma, it felt nice to have so much positive attention. My self-worth was low, so the cheap compliments and instant gratification of the app felt incredible. Who am I to deserve their attention? Why would they choose to speak to me of all women? Not my healthiest coping mechanism, but I wanted to feel desirable. That's where I met Derek. Derek was an unassuming average guy. He was cute enough, but not so attractive that I felt self-conscious. Derek and I shared a few interests: craft beer, hiking, and he had a sense of humor that I liked. We agreed to meet up at a local restaurant. I was so nervous, my first day in 8 years. I donned my cutest dress, got made up, and headed out. As I waited in the restaurants, my palms were sweaty, my heart was fluttering, and I began to question myself. He arrived and everything was awkward at first. We ordered our first beers and started to break the ice. As soon as the buzz of the alcohol hit, our conversations took off. We had relaxed in each other's company, and the rest of the day went smoothly. We joked about karaoke across town. He laughed about how he didn't like karaoke. I'm a huge fan of karaoke. Well, no superstar. I've spent a good amount of time in choirs and can carry a tune well enough. One of my favorite rowdy weekend activities is going to that bar and busting out some songs with the sweet taste of gin on my tongue. I convinced him to go with me, and we left the restaurant. We sang into the night, taking shots, flirting, laughing. We ended the night in his truck, hearts racing with excitement. This had been what I needed. We texted back and forth more often, and soon we were talking about another date. I had enjoyed our time together, and liked that I didn't feel a deep connection with him. It was fun, and that was it. But my heart wasn't tangled up in feelings. He felt safe. We decided for a second date that we would go tubing down a river that runs through our town. We had parked his orange truck at the end of the tubing run, and took the tubes in my truck up the river. We agreed that he would zip my truck key with his into a pocket on his shorts, and he would drop me off at my truck afterwards. Bright summer heat warmed our skin, and the water felt crisp and fresh on our toes. The afternoon slipped past as we floated down the river. When we reached the bottom, we deflated our tubes and headed back to my truck. Only Derek reached into his pocket. His face sank. He looked at me and said, "Your key is gone." I laughed. Surely he was joking. He insisted that this wasn't a joke. Gravity pulled at my stomach, and I began to panic. This was the only copy of my truck key, and I had taken it on the river. I felt foolish, and worried about how I would get a new key if I can't find this one. The river was long, and we'd been tubing for hours. We'd stop at several places to swim. He offered to drive me home, and I accepted. During the drive, we made a plan to meet up the next day and search for my key at some of the stops we made. We spent the next afternoon combing our swimming holes for my key. Up and down we swam, with very little hope we would ever see my keys. We had to try though, and we kept at it. From one spot to another, we drove, we swam, and we went on. At the very last place, we checked. As the light of the afternoon faded into hazy orange, something caught my eye. Underwater, near the shore, were my keys. We were elated and could not believe our luck. To celebrate, we went back to his place for some drinks. He drove me down a long wooded driveway, and at the very end was a shaded trailer. He told me that he was only renting a room here from an elderly couple, but They were on vacation, so we could be alone. We walked over the creaking porch and entered the trailer. Inside, I could see the kitchen was messy. Not just a couple of dishes, but every surface was covered with mess. He ushered me away to show me his room. It was small, and not very clean either. Dirty clothes, mattress on the floor, and Rubbermaid Ben with some snacks like Doritos and cheap warm beer. We slept together, the yellowed light of the trailer accentuating the stains on the walls. Afterwards, the spark of fun I had felt when we first met had withered, and I felt gross. I decided it would be our last date. A week passed, and we had hardly texted. Our brief fling was ending, and I didn't expect to see him again. My mind moved on to other things. The coming weekend, my friends were coming to town, and I was excited. We made plans to go to the karaoke bar together on Saturday night. When the day arrived, I was surprised to see a text from Derek on my phone. "Are you going to karaoke tonight?" It read. I responded that I was, and he texted back that he would be there. "I thought you didn't like karaoke," I asked him, and he said that he had been invited by a girl he worked with, and thought he should give me a heads up that he would be with a date in case I was there. I thanked him for taking the time to let me know, reassured him that I wouldn't be bothered at all, and said I hope he had a great date. Around 9:30 that night, my friends and I arrived at the bar. The dim lights and reflective foil stars an all too familiar scene. We got our drinks and picked a booth with a good view of the stage. I had a strange sensation, like someone was watching me. I turned my head scanning the bar, and our eyes locked. Derek and his date were a few booths away, and he was watching us. He waved zealously with a big smile. His date turned around to look, and I managed an awkward wave. I was absolutely fine with him being on a date, but I didn't want to advertise that we knew each other or make this date uncomfortable. My friends were all aware of the time we had spent together, my thoughts on the experience, and the texts he had sent me earlier. We were all thinking it was a bit odd that he would go out of his way to interact with me in front of his date, but no harm, no foul, he was just being friendly. The evening carried on, and we all had a great time, basking in the atmosphere, drinking in the songs and laughter. A couple of hours in, we were sitting in our booth, and Derek stumbled over to our table with his date. He introduced her as Kate, and plopped down beside me, pulling her down into a booth with him. The strong smell of alcohol oozed off of them. I could see they were hammered. It became obvious they both had too much to drink. Their eyes glazed, and words stuttered. Kate seemed really nice, despite her state, and she launched into a drunk story to the whole table. My friends and I were fairly uncomfortable, and were unsure what was going on. Under the table, I felt Derek's sticky hand slide into my thigh. His date was right there, and I was stunned. Without making a scene, I removed his hand and excused myself to get another drink. As I walked across the room, I could feel his eyes raking my back, and sure enough, when I turned around he was watching. When I got back, Kate was slurring that her taxi had come. She and Derek exchanged a sloppy kiss and goodnights, and then it was just us and Derek. Derek's mood shifted after that. He was drunkenly aware of how uncomfortable the table was, and we could tell he was brooding about his date having left without him. Derek turned his attention to me. He slung his heavy arm onto my shoulder and leaned in, his sour breath managing to come together to form a clumsy sentence. "You're so cute. I love your laugh." I was rigid and just wanted him to leave. When he got up to get another beer, my friends and I spoke about the situation, one of them remarking, "You know he can do better than this, right?" I said yes. As casual as this has been, I had made a mistake. We came to the conclusion that it would be best if we ended the night early, as we didn't see him leaving me alone. As a backup plan, if anything went south, we agreed that the girls would, quote, go to the bathroom and leave out the back door, while our male friend would distract him and slip away. Derek arrived at the table, slurping down his beer very fast. He slurred, "Where are we going next?" I hesitated, but my friend told him that we would all be going home. Derek said he would walk us there, and we politely declined. He was leaning up against a wall and barely holding himself up at this point. We asked him how he was going to get home, and if we could call him a cab. Derek drunkenly pouted that he could just come to my place with me. Trying to shut him down as politely as I could, I told him that my child was there with a sitter, so I couldn't have him over. He didn't need to know that wasn't true. He refused a taxi and said he would just sleep in his truck, since his eyelids were dropping. and looking at the rest of his state, it seemed reasonable that he would be asleep in a truck, and we accepted that answer. As we started to leave, he stumbled after us. We stopped and reminded him that we were going to bed. He argued again that he should come with me. My friends and I locked eyes. It was time to engage our backup plan. The two girls and I excused ourselves to the washroom while our friend distracted him. Slipping out the back door, the cool rush of night air hit us, and we hurried to the path that led to their hotel. Our friend caught up with us and said he had left Derek behind at the bar. We were all relieved to be out of there and started to walk back to the hotel. One of the girls was sober and offered to drive me home when we got to the hotel, and I accepted. A few minutes down the path, my phone began to ring. I looked at the caller ID and I felt my stomach drop. It was Derek. I turned the volume down and let it ring, and to my surprise, he left a voicemail. I turned on the speaker and played it out loud. Derek's voice sounded confused as his words melted together into my phone. "Where are you guys? I thought we were gonna hang out. I don't understand." We were all glad that we had left and agreed that this had been wild. That's when the phone rang again. Another voicemail popped up on my screen. In the dim light of the trail, I played the new voicemail aloud once more. His drunken speech was more intense this time, as he launched into how he didn't understand why I had left. I had hurt his feelings, and he was in love. The tone of his voice shook me when I heard him say, "I love you," but there was something dark and heavy about it that left me feeling unsettled. We were all creeped out, but happy to see the bright sign of the hotel ahead. We traveled the carpeted hallway to their room so my friend could grab her keys and take me home. As we entered the room, the phone began to ring again. This time, the voicemail sent shockwaves of fear into my body. Derek's voice had taken on an edge, and he repeated that he loved me, but he was actually really fucking mad at me for leaving him at the bar. He went on about how could I do this to him, and he didn't know what he was gonna do. His voice shook with anger as he stumbled over himself, expressing how I had betrayed him. The last thing he said before hanging up echoed in the hotel room. "You know I'm really starting to fucking hate you." This guy was unhinged and I was terrified. I was grateful the sight of Derek didn't show up when I was alone in his secluded trailer. My friends gave me a hug and told me to call them if I needed anything and to keep them updated. My friend took me home as I unlocked the door and stepped into the comfort of my home. I felt exhausted. It had not been the night out I expected, and Derek's erratic behavior had really freaked me out. Fresh out of an abusive relationship, his actions at the bar, then voicemails rang some all too familiar bells. That's when I saw the headlights. It was very late for anyone to be driving down my street. I peeked through the curtain. My blood ran cold and I trembled. Sitting in the cab of his orange truck was Derek. Mind racing, I panicked. This dude could barely hold himself up when we left. He was blackout obliterated. How did he drive across town to my house? How did he find me? I immediately remembered the other week when he dropped me off after my key was lost. How could I have been so stupid? I barely knew him. We only met 3 times. Derek's face was stony and etched with rage as he sat in the dark cab staring at my house. He wasn't getting out. He was just staring. While I was on my hands and knees peeking out of the window. All my lights were off inside. I was sure he couldn't see me. Then the screen on my phone lit up. He was calling me again. I quickly hid it so he didn't see the light. Hands shaking. I played the voicemail as quietly as I could. Derek only said one thing at a time. A phrase that sent terror shooting down my spine. In a drunken sing-song voice, he almost taunted me quietly. "Where are you?" Click. I was terrified. Somehow, I hadn't really considered that I could be in danger, and chalked up all of the fear of my past experiences. Surely I was overreacting, and it was my fault for reading too much into this. I shouldn't be this scared, and I don't want to make a scene. That last voicemail sealed the deal. I figured even if I was overreacting, at the very least, he was a drunk driver. I called 911 and the dispatcher said someone would be there in a couple of minutes. As I peeked out the window, I saw him get out of his truck. He was done waiting. His heavy feet stumbled as they hit the pavement, and he looked around. Derek's voice cut through the night. He started yelling my name. The wild anger in his voice was tangible through the walls, and he just yelled into the street, "Where are you?" Derek started to stumble towards my house when the flashing red and blue lights cascaded down the street, lighting up his face and highlighting every ounce of rage carved into his features. 2 police cars pulled up and the officers got out. I was still peeking out from the inside of my dark house and couldn't hear much of what was happening. I watched them breathalyze him, which he obviously failed. The officers inspected his truck. They spoke for a while, and one of the officers came to my door. I spoke to him about what had happened, and he was very empathetic. He said as unsettling as his actions had been, there was not much they could do without a direct threat. The officer let me know that they would be taking him in for the night, and he would be charged with drunk driving, but that he would be out tomorrow, and to make sure I kept my doors locked and stayed safe. The tow truck came to remove his orange truck from the road, and I could see him arguing. The officers weren't having any of it. They turned him around to cuff him. As the handcuffs locked around his wrist, he yelled out one last time, looking directly at the window I was peeking out. "I know you're in there. My name. Why don't you come out and say goodbye?" As quickly as my street had filled up, it was emptied. The quiet shadows of the night swallowing the earlier chaos into nothingness. Derek had texted me the next afternoon. "I'm very sorry about last night. I was in a bad place." I responded that his actions were unacceptable, and how dare he show up to my house that my child lives at, and that I would prefer not to hear from him ever again. He apologized one last time, and I haven't heard from him since. Over the next few months, I would see him on his bike going to and from his workplace, so I knew he lost his license. I was always wary that we would bump into each other at some point, which thankfully never happened. I can only imagine how much angrier he was after he lost his license. I found out he had moved to the mainland a while back, which was quite a relief for me, and I no longer feel as on edge around town. So, Derek, let's never meet again. A few years ago, I was on Tinder where I matched with a police officer. I thought his dog was cute, and I figured this was an opportunity to finally pet a canine police dog. I was quickly disinterested after listening to him complain about his recent divorce. I don't recall details, but I remember it was very apparent he was the problematic person in the relationship. I was also very grossed out by how he fetishized me for my breasts, tattoos, and colorful hair. I was very upfront and told him I wasn't interested and that he was setting off some red flags for me. He begged me to give him a chance. I said no and blocked his number. A few days later, I get a knock on my door at around midnight. My heart dropped into my ass. It startled me so much I looked out the peephole and I see a stranger holding food. It's an Uber Eats delivery driver. I tell him through the door I didn't order food, but he said someone ordered it and he knew my name. I asked who ordered it and he said a name I didn't recognize. I tell him I don't want the food and give him directions to the dumpster to throw the food out because, at this point, I have no idea if he is actually from Uber. Later on, I'm going through my dating app matches and realize it was the cop's name. I go through my blocked messages and this guy had texted me a lot. The last text, "I hope you liked your dinner." I decided it's best to unblock this man so I can keep an eye on what he is saying in case I need to be worried about my safety, or if I'm gonna need to buy some bear mace to drop a cop. A few weeks later, I'm at work. I'm a hairstylist, and I get a call from a number I don't recognize. I answer and I assume it's a new client. The voice on the other end says, "Hey Rachel, I'm at Starbucks across the street. What's your drink order?" I ask, "Who is this? I don't have you in my appointment book," assuming it's a regular, and I made a scheduling order. He says his name, and again my heart drops into my ass. How does he know where I work? It's that cop. I ask him how does he know where I live and work, and he explains that he did a reverse image search on photos from my dating profile, found my social media, and Yelp page from my salon, then looked at my address from there. I tell him I'm calling his station reporting him for stalking, and if he ever comes near me, I will consider it a threat, and I will be ready to physically defend myself. After all that, he still begs me for another chance. I hang up, call the police station he works for, I'm in a very small town, and complain. They don't let me email screenshots of my creepy texts. I could tell nothing would be done. The lady literally said, "Oh, I'm sorry, he's going through a lot right now." They literally treat him like he's the victim. He's mostly left me alone after, but I was so scared living alone for the first time in my life. I have a semi-popular meme page on Instagram with about 8,000 followers. I sifted through and found like 5 of his accounts. I blocked them and moved on. This was several years ago, but all these memories came flooding back when I noticed a familiar profile photo on an account who commented on a post. I must have missed an account of his when blocking. I had posted a photo of me holding 2 big tunas I caught on a fishing trip, and he commented, "God, I wish I was one of those fish. I'd love to know what it's like to be held by you. You." First time poster here, so please be kind for any spelling errors and such. As a bit of backstory, I was working at a small chain motel in the Midwest as a night auditor, so my hours were normally 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. Those kind of hours, and being a woman, I'm bound to have some weird stories. The scariest time I've ever had while working there happened within my first month. So it was a little before my shift started, and because I was single and 22, I was on Tinder before work. I matched with this guy who seems cool, a little goth/alternative, and into Ouija boards, which is my type, so I was pretty hyped at the time. We talk for a bit, and I tell him I have to go to work. We say goodbye. Now, that night was my first night of training, so I was running the motel by myself for 9 hours. I was already a little nervous, but the vaguely familiar guy comes in to the front desk and asks for me by name. In my head, I've got red flags blaring at me because this dude is weird, not by looks, but just by vibe. I tell him that I'm me, and he explains that he's the guy from Tinder, and he saw that I was less than a mile away, so he went to see if I was possibly working at his hotel. That's right, this guy was staying where I worked. That was red flag number 2. I stay behind the comfort of my desk for 2 hours because the guy won't stop talking to me, mostly about his ex and how she left him and how he beat people up and how he wanted to bang me. Needless to say, I was uncomfortable, and this hadn't happened to me before in a work environment, so I did not know what to do. He finally decided to go to bed around 2 to 3 a.m., and I take a much needed smoke break. I go outside, and right after I spark up, guess who shows up? Creepy dude. I snoop a bit on his account, and he was a painter, and he was doing work locally, so he wasn't from here. He tells me where he's from and keeps getting closer and closer to me. He asks if he could smoke some weed, which I say yes, to get him away from me. I showed him where the cameras weren't at, and he pulled me in, smelled my neck, and started grabbing me. I swiftly hit him and told him he better not fucking touch me. I threw my cigarette on the ground and grabbed my phone and called my boss before going inside. Creepy dude rips the phone from my hand and proceeds to text himself. Now he had my number. The first thing he sends me is a grotesque picture of his, well, you know. It was disgusting, and it was like nothing I've seen before. Then came the creepy BDSM gifs, with captions like, "I can't wait to do this to you, you know what room I'm in." Now, I'm already freaking out, and I don't know why I didn't call the cops, and my boss wasn't answering. So, there's me in the back office having a panic attack, when I get more videos. Why I click it, I'll never know. I refuse to say what I saw in detail, but it was a snuff film, very violent, and very sexual. I then locked myself in the back room, cried, and waited a few hours before proceeding to make hotel breakfast. The text went on for a few days until I had enough and got the balls to tell my boss. He immediately kicked out creepy dude and banned him from our hotel. His company is not even allowed to book with that hotel anymore. In hindsight, I would have called the police, but I was just too scared. Creepy dude, let's never meet again.